The question I would love to hear our listeners answer would be, who beat who? Did the Seahawks beat the Rams, or did the Rams beat the Rams? Because this was a game that was just a one-score game. The Seahawks beat the Rams 16-10, but the Rams turned the ball over 5 times. DJ, what do you make of it? You're our football guy. Like, tell me about it. Who beat who?
Well, I think you can make a case for both sides here.
Right, so pick one.
Okay, that's fair. I'm going to argue the Seahawks beat the Rams.
Okay, how so?
There are 2 reasons for that. Number one, their defense created all of those turnovers. They pressured Goff to force those interceptions. And then Earl Thomas, the play he made, that kind of, was a tone setter for the rest of the game.
You talk about the punch out of bounds on the Gurley, what would have been touchdown, where Gurley was running towards that pylon, and Thomas reached out, punched the ball, forced a fumble, and that ball then hit the pylon. Kind of a lucky bounce for the Seahawks.
Yes.
Ended up ruling being a fumble out of the back of the end zone for the Rams, so that was a touchback for the Seahawks, essentially, and they got the ball and they got to take over.
Yes,
so.
And that play, that's just hustle. That's who wants it more, and great teams are going to make those plays, and that's why the Seahawks were a great team and outshined the Rams on Sunday. And throughout the day, their defense was awesome. Sheldon Richardson got a pick, and they were just flying around. Frank Clark was absolutely amazing, and I think we're really seeing him come into his own with pass rushing, and he's going to have to take on a bigger role now because Cliff Averill, I don't know if we're going to actually get him back, if ever. Jay Glazer reported on Sunday that his injury is actually career-threatening, possibly, as he was, struggling to have feeling from his neck down to his arm, or something like that. The Hawks, in my opinion, did win the game on Sunday.
All right, Seth, I want you to answer the question. You need to pick a side. Did the Seahawks beat the Rams, or did the Rams beat the Rams?
I do think the Seahawks beat the Rams. If you watch the first half and then you watch the second half, you'd see 2 completely different offenses for the Rams, and the reason being the Seahawks made some fantastic halftime adjustments defensively, and the Rams didn't score a single point that whole half. I mean, the turnovers, yes, a couple of those were really unforced on the Rams' part. The dropped punt by Tavon Austin, the Seahawks can't really take credit for creating that turnover, but when there's 5 turnovers, at least a couple of those you have to give credit to the Seattle defense for forcing.
That's fair. I'm gonna go the other way, maybe just to be that guy, maybe because I actually believe it. I think the Rams beat the Rams, especially because you mentioned the 5 turnovers. I'll give you a couple, like the Earl Thomas play. All hustle, made it happen, punched the ball out, and then kind of got a lucky bounce that it hit the pylon. If it doesn't hit the pylon, Rams take over at the 1. They keep the ball right there at the goal line. It can go ahead and score. The fact that it was a one-score game and the Rams dropped a potential game-winning touchdown in the end zone on one of the last plays, that's all you need to know.
I mean, Cooper Kupp, great wide receiver, but he was getting beat up all day, and he was getting hit all day by those Seahawk defensive backs, and that had a big reason to do with why Cooper Kupp wasn't able to make that catch. Because the physicality of the Seahawks defense, it wears on you. And, just playing a football game in the NFL and playing against a defense like that, it wears on you, and eventually it's going to take its toll mentally and physically.
DJ, I got to cut you off real quick. 1 second. We got a caller. His name is Josh. He's from off campus, all the way from Minnesota, actually.
Oh,
Josh, you want to answer the question for us. Tell us, did the Seahawks beat the Rams, or did the Rams beat the Rams?
Well, being out here, I'm not able to really watch the Seahawks play, but if I'm looking at the highlights, I think the Rams beat the Rams. Like that one fumble that Gurley had into the end zone, that should have been a touchdown probably.
Right.
And that one pass on 3rd and 10 that they had with 12 seconds to go, that should have been caught by that wide receiver. So, I mean, the Seahawks did good, put themselves in a position to win, but really it was the Rams who beat the Rams.
Excellent. Josh, want to thank you for your call. Thanks for tuning in, man. Hope you listen to us next week, Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., man. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Anytime.
All right.
Well,
so if you want to be like Josh and call us and tell us, did the Seahawks beat the Rams or the Rams beat the Rams, you could do it 253-535-3289. 73-32. Once again, 253-535-7332.
Let's move over to the offensive side. What do you guys think of the offensive performance from Wilson, the offensive line, and just everybody in general?
I was just going to point out how awful I think Eddie Lacy is. I have a number of Packer friends who are laughing at me when the Seahawks signed Eddie Lacy because of how bad he is. And now having seen him for 5 games, I'd have to agree. He gets hit, and he does not do what Marshawn Lynch would be able to do. He just falls over.
I think when you're trying to compare anybody to Marshawn Lynch, that's tough because he's a future Hall of Famer. He is, a once-in-a-lifetime player with how just beastly, I guess, is the word he is. And part of the reason I think Eddie Lacy isn't doing too hot is because of that offensive line. Yes, I know it is an easy out, Christian, but it's true. Everything starts up front, and when you don't have gaps and holes to run through, you're not going to be able to create as much. Especially Eddie Lacy is not good enough to create on his own like Marshawn was, and so I think that's one point that we can attribute to his struggles.
Also comparing, towards the end of his career Eddie Lacy to a Marshawn Lynch in his prime is also maybe mightily unfair.
Eddie Lacy's not that old.
He's probably at the end of his run, though.
Yeah, that is true.
He's running back in the NFL. It's like 4 years max for most of those guys, right?
Yeah, most of those guys, not Marshawn.
I mean, would be curious to look up and see what he's doing down in Oakland. I would venture to say not very much.
Yeah, but he had his stint here in Seattle was amazing, and the way he lit the crowd up at CenturyLink, and just he was the heart and soul of that whole team pretty much with the way he ran, and just like the funness he carried himself with. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's a great way to describe him. Yeah, it is now.
So going back to the Seahawks and the Ram game, we want to talk about the offense a little bit. I don't think Russell Wilson was very good at all. I was 24 for 37, 198 yards, a touchdown. Didn't he throw an interception as well?
Yeah, he threw a pick, and that pick, that ball should have never been thrown. That's totally on Russell. I would say he wasn't stellar, but he did what he needed to do and improvise with the way he needed to get the Hawks over the hump and get them into field goal position. He did what he needed to do to beat a team that turned the ball over 5 times. Yeah,
and had a chance to win in one of the last plays.
Yeah.
Who beat who? The Rams beat the Rams?
Come
on, dude.
The Seahawks did just enough to win, man.
Come on, dude. Okay. They did just enough to barely win the game.
You want to know one thing? I want to point out one thing that I did think was a positive point for the offense was their involvement with Jimmy Graham. I saw something that I rarely see up in Seattle, and that was they threw a fade to Jimmy Graham on an ISO route against a smaller corner and scored a touchdown. Props to Darrell Bevel, because this needs to become more and more a thing that they do down in the red zone, because like I've said before, and I'll say it again, Jimmy Graham is a freak of nature at 6'7", 270, and a player that needs to be involved.
Seth, you mentioned Eddie Lacy. Any other person on the offense that caught your attention negatively or positively?
Well, I'm going to give a compliment to one group in particular, and this is the greatest compliment that I can give to this group. That would be the Seattle O-line. They were average. They were not completely terrible. And the fact that I can say that about Seattle's offensive line is pretty impressive. They did all right against that great Rams defensive line.
And one interesting thing to look ahead to is Jokel just had a scope surgery on his knee. He's probably going to miss the Giants game, they said. They just worked out Brandon Albert yesterday, but unfortunately, no deal is going to be done. He left without a deal down there. So, I'm wondering what they're going to do. Maybe Glowinski moves into that left guard position while Jokel is gone, because Abuji, is that his name?
I think so.
Abuji has kind of taken over his right guard position. I think he's played pretty well to this point. And I know Glowinski can't play tackle, so they're not going to move Odiombo into left guard. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with that going forward.
All I do know, the bye week is this week, and then the schedule gets pretty easy, pretty light for the Seahawks moving forward. You mentioned the Giants game. I mean, they don't have a lot of tough opponents coming up until later in the year. So the bye week comes at a good time for them. They can kind of readjust, reevaluate, and fix what they need to fix, because I'm not convinced. I'm not sold on the offense. Like I said, they did just enough to beat the Rams down in LA. I mean, they definitely have things to fix, and now they're on their bye week. So